Eventide Entertainment presents The Drive-In, hosted by Aaron Lopez. All right, welcome back to another episode of The Drive-In. I'm your host, Aaron Lopez, and my guest host today is the first three-time guest host. He was the first two-time guest host, so he's probably going to be the first four-time guest host.
I'm just racking them all up at this point.
He is our high score winner, very Ready Player One, reference there. But it's Jack. Jack is back, and we are here to review Ready Player One. So Jack, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you. I'm enjoying this. This is fun.
Well, and it's cool because we finally have Jack on a movie that isn't supposed to be bad, or at least a representation of a bad movie. Like, there's nothing that, at least going into this movie, you're like, oh, this is going to be bad, or, because he was on first time with Geostorm, which is still the worst movie that I have seen while doing this podcast. And then the last one he was on was Disaster Artist, based on the worst movie in the world, essentially, with it being The Room. So now this one, we actually get to talk about some things with the expectation not necessarily being that it's a bad movie. Will it be a bad review? We'll have to wait and see. But Jack has read the book, Ready Player One, by Ernest Cline. So that's going to be a good little point of reference. I have read it. I read it when I was first starting teaching. That's about 5 years ago, though. So I think he's probably read it more recently than that.
I've read the first two chapters in last week, and that's about it.
All right, so there we go.
And then it was when it first came out, it was a big thing. So
yeah.
I read it twice at that point.
Well, there you go. So that'll be good to go back and refer. But your specs on Ready Player One, we have a Steven Spielberg movie. It seems like he's been putting out a lot lately. He did The Post, which I didn't really like. But then this one too. So he's jumping back into things. Starring Ty Sheridan, Olivia Cook, Ben Mendelsohn, and Simon Pegg, and the voice talents of T.J. Miller. Your trailer rundown for this week. A lot of movies. Not really sure exactly how many of them we'll get to talking to in detail, but we'll do our best. We had Show Dogs, Won't You Be My Neighbor, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, The House with the Clock in the Walls, Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald, Deadpool 2, and Rampage. A ton of long-name movies. I feel like I was writing for days putting these down. But were any of those ones that you were excited to see?
I would have to say I'm real excited for the new Fantastic Beasts movie, even though it has Johnny Depp in it.
I don't know how much of it it'll have. I think they're really playing like a slow burn. Like, they're just not going to show him much. I mean, this one is named after his character, so you would expect you'd see a lot more of him in this one. But
yeah, I'm really hopeful that it's a minimal thing. I do think that it'll be an interesting concept, seeing young Dumbledore and all that. So yeah, I'm excited for that one.
Well, the trailer only showed him once, and it would seem like after they reveal at the end of the first one, sorry, spoilers, but it's been out for a couple years now, if they reveal, hey, Johnny Depp's Grindelwald, okay, so then you would expect them to just pepper the next movie with Johnny Depp, because they finally reveal it, but at least the trailer only shows him once for a very short moment. So
right, and I don't know if maybe that's partially due to the whole backlash of casting him, because that was like that. Right around the Amber Heard stories and everything coming up. So it could just be minimizing that to still have revenue, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited for that one. I was very late on the wagon to see that one. It came out in a time in theaters I wasn't able to go see it, and finally saw it on DVD, and I liked it. I really enjoyed the first one, so for me personally, I think it's kind of what I wanted some of the other Harry Potter movies to be. But we'll see. It's different. The Harry Potter movies started coming out when a lot of the technological advances in movies were coming out. So it kind of the earlier ones, the nostalgia factor, just booms with me. I love Sorcerer's Stone, but it really wasn't that good as in comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, technologically it wasn't, but best writing, I think. And what other ones? What ones were you thinking about going to see?
I like the Spider-Man one too. Every time I see that trailer, even though it's only been that trailer that I've seen so far, every time I see it, I'm like, I need to go see that when it comes out. I'm a little concerned that they're pushing so heavy for it, considering I've been seeing these trailers since, 2-3 months ago, and it doesn't come out until Christmas.
Yeah.
So it's a little concerning that they're showing this clip over and over, but I'm excited for it.
Well, I think it's a cool concept. There are people sitting next to us. They're like, there can't be more than one Spider-Man. Clearly, they don't read comics. But I think it's one of those that I think I'd rather see a live action of, but there's a better chance that we'd see this animation before a live action. I think that if we were to wait, it would be 10 years before they'd ever do a live action Spider-Verse style movie. I don't know. I think it'll be good. A friend of mine actually was telling me when we went and saw this the other day, that she hates Spider-Man. I'm like, how can you hate Spider-Man? Spider-Man's amazing. But I think that this is one where I'm not as sure. I'll go see it. I'm not as sure if I'm going to like it, though. I'm very hesitant.
I like the art style on it.
It's cool.
Because it has that, like, comic book look to it almost, while it also kind of has, like, a claymation-y kind of stop-motion feel.
Kind of like Scanner Darkly. With that, like, almost like it's how you see, like, our Archer, where it's like it's real, but it's not real. It's animation, but it's claymation, and it's like, I don't know. It's hard to really define.
It's a good style, I think, but I am concerned about how good the actual movie will be, and I don't know how much, like, the good Marvel Studios is involved in this one versus
it's got the name on it.
Sony.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about that one. I did enjoy, so I had seen the trailer for this before when it first came out, but Won't You Be My Neighbor, to me, I'm so excited for. I love documentaries, and so if you guys are not privy to this, go watch the trailer for this if you liked Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood or you're into documentaries at all. To me, this seems like this is going to be one of the best documentaries to hit theaters in a long time.
I agree with that. The other thing is, it was done by the same people that did 20 Feet from Stardom.
Oh, okay. I know that.
They put that on there. I don't know what level, but there was some involvement between the two. And that was also a really strong documentary. So, when I saw that, I was like, okay, that adds a little bit of like a pedigree to it almost.
Yeah. You very rarely see documentaries, first off, get trailers, but then for documentaries to be like, hey, we're going to be in theaters. Like, you get those in like big cities and indie theaters, but very rarely do you see something like this actually say like, hey, yeah, this is going to be coming out and we're going to put it in theaters. It's uncommon. Yeah. It's not as common. Let's get it over with. Show Dogs.
Your favorite one?
Oh my God.
You looked so excited during that one.
Show Dogs is brought to you by the same geniuses who put together Beverly Hills Chihuahua 1 and 2.
So it's good pedigree.
Yeah, talk about pedigree. It just looks so bad. Like, Will Arnett, what are you doing, man? He must need money. Because it looks stupid. It looks so stupid. It's like a combination of, like Scooby-Doo and Beverly Hills Chihuahua.
Well, it has some of those people, too. Yeah,
and brought to you by the creators of Scooby-Doo.
And it's like, oh, good, that's what you want to attach your name to. Like, that is certainly a banner you can fly.
Well, I didn't mind the first one for what it was. Then the second one, I don't even remember, like, what it was about. I don't know.
It had Seth Green in it.
Yeah. Again, I don't know if that's endearing to many people. But
probably not, no.
Yeah, just don't waste your time. Show Dogs it'll be a good kid movie.
It's going to win a lot of Razzies.
Yeah, yes.
Like, well, Arnett, you might win an award.
There you go.
It's not the one you want, but...
Well, and then, so, going from one movie that's clearly for kids to one that I don't know what the hell it's going to, whose audience it is really going to, is The House with the Clock in the Walls. It seems like it could be like kind of a kid movie, like kind of like fantastic, like fantasy, but it also looks kind of creepy and scary as shit.
Yeah, it seems like a weird one to me. I think Jack Black has like developed a reputation almost for more kid-friendly movies at this point. And so I was getting a little bit of a Goosebumps vibe with it.
It felt like to me like a combination of Goosebumps, Monster House, and the Miss Peregrine's Home for the Peculiar Children or something.
I was getting a little bit of Hugo in there too, like, as far as like time period and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know about that one. Like, I'm moderately intrigued, but I don't know if that's one I'll like rush out to like see.
I'm very interested in it. Like, I don't know why, and it's just because I think it's the trailer was so obscure as to really where it's going with it. I mean, there were aspects of like dolls that were walking around, and like there were really creepy elements to it. But then there were like you said, Jack Black playing up this element where you're like, and there's a little kid in it, so you're like, oh, okay, so it's for kids. You know, maybe you're like a preteen kind of a fantasy movie, but I don't know.
Yeah, and then the creepy part was like the tick in the background, like that they just kept repeating tick over and over, and it's like, okay, that's weird. Like,
yeah, and I don't know. I had heard this movie title before, and I was like, that's a really long, obnoxious title, but The House with a Clock in the Walls. And I don't know. I'm probably going to go check it out when it comes out, but I might need a second trailer to sell me on it. But speaking of second trailers, Rampage, which actually comes out April 13th now. It was supposed to be coming out April 20th. So they must... I think a lot of movies were impacted by the Avengers bumping up.
Yeah.
Because Rampage was going to be coming out with 2 weeks before the Avengers, and now it was going to be coming out with 1. So I think they bumped themselves up a week to try to get 2 weeks before Avengers destroys everybody's box office. But the second Rampage trailer, I thought it was really interesting. They incorporate a little bit more, show you, hey, this is not quite... Have you ever played the video game?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm pumped for it. It's not going to follow the video game in anything other than just basic content of large mutant animals destroying cities, but that's the game in itself. So, I don't know. I'm excited for it. I think I'll definitely be going to see that one. That actually may be that week's review.
And we all know how I am with disaster films, so...
Speaking of, we never saw it. Well, I never saw it. But did you ever go see the Hurricane Heist movie?
I didn't. It was probably... There's a reason it was probably only in theaters for like 2 weeks, but...
I don't even know if it was 2 weeks. I think it was only a week.
It might have only been a week. But yeah, I wanted so bad to see that. It looked so awful, and I can't wait. I will end up watching it, because the two movie styles that I like have just like this obnoxious love for are disaster films and films where weather happens, and heist movies. Like, all of these things, and it's like, it's the perfect bad film.
Well, and I looked at it and I'm like, heist movies are hard to pull off without being like cheesy or overdone or extremely just obvious. Because like, it's a formula that you really can't stray off of too much. Like, people decide they're going to do a heist, they need to, for whatever reason they need it, and that's usually where you stray off. Something goes wrong, they eventually end up getting the money or figuring out they don't need the money, and then they go on their separate ways.
Right.
You know, with a bad guy getting their comeuppance. Like, that's your heist movie. So, this one you throw in a hurricane, and, you know, now there's weather involved.
When your top billed star is Shannon from Lost, too. That's a problem.
Rough. That's rough.
Yeah, that's...
And we didn't talk about Deadpool 2, but we've talked about it plenty on here, and it wasn't a new trailer, so I'm still excited for it. I think that it's going to be a good one. The new trailer, though, that came out, if you guys haven't seen it, the second one, that one's, or it might even be the third at this point, but the most recent gives you a lot more, like, hey, they're going to go X-Force with it, and I think that we're getting some Terry Crews, which I'm always excited for. Love me some Terry Crews. But other than that, yeah, I mean, Deadpool 2's still in there, and I think it'll be a good one. So, your spoiler-free summary for Ready Player One is as follows. Based on Ernest Cline's novel of the same name, when the creator of a virtual reality world called the Oasis dies, he releases a video challenge for all Oasis users to find his Easter egg, which gives the winner his fortune and controlling stock of the Oasis. I think anything else needs to be said without getting into any real big spoilers?
Not really. It's basically technological Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, if you're waiting to see the trailer, or sorry, the movie before you listen to the rest of this, the best way I can say it is an 80s and 90s pop culture wet dream. Like, just as many of those references they can throw into it. So if you're into that, definitely go check it out. If you are thinking, I know nothing about pop culture, you may enjoy it still. You're just not going to get nearly as much out of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, random things to look at.
Some that I even had to look up after the fact because I felt like I was going to miss them. And I'm sure some of them are going to come up in our conversation that one or both of us missed or, you know, something along those lines. But But yeah, this is about that time where you guys can pause if you have not yet seen the movie and come back and see us after you have. Alright, so again, this is the time where we now have only those people who have seen the movie or who just like to listen to me talk, or those that were just that excited to hear that Jack was back for his third episode. Alright, initial thoughts. Ready Player One. What did you think?
Well, we both ended up going and seeing this twice.
Yes.
Before this happened. And it was probably a good thing for me, because the first time I watched it, I was literally on damage control mode. Because I had read the book, I remembered enough about the book to know what I wanted to see and what I kind of expected to see. And once it starts deviating from that, it gets a little sad.
Yeah. And
you have to, reset your expectations, and I think the second time around that really worked.
I was that way too. It had been a while since I had read the book, but there are two things that I was looking forward to, and we didn't get either of them. We got close in the Jade Key, the second portion, but we had the film syncs that we didn't really get. Mm-hmm. We had them, talking about the Shining. So there was elements of movie in it, but it was not the same.
Yeah.
So we didn't get the film syncs, and we didn't get really any of the keys and challenges and gates. None of that.
Right.
We had the concept there. But so yeah, that was disappointing for me. But I'm with you. I definitely, the second time, after knowing what it was, I can say, I think I like it more having seen it twice than if I would have reviewed it after one.
Yeah. Same thing for me.
So, we jump right into it, and it gives you the very first thing that you see is the stacks. 2045, Columbus, Ohio, the stacks, and we jump right into getting a little bit of Van Halen, which I loved the soundtrack for this.
Oh yeah,
it's just it fit. It seemed like something that you would either, if you experienced these video games in the 80s and 90s, that you would be listening to, like at an arcade, or just for me, they just felt like pop culture iconic songs.
Right. And that was one of the big points of the book was once the contest was basically announced was it brought back 80s culture.
Yes.
It was a big thing. So the fact that they had these songs popping up, it made perfect sense for the context of everything, and it just made everything flow really well, and it fit well.
Well, and I'll say it now, but it seems like, so I'm currently directing Rock of Ages, and all these 80s rock songs, I cannot escape them. They are all over the place. So we saw We're Not Gonna Take It was in there. Right. There's another one too, and I can't remember what it is. But there's a couple songs, and it's like these rock songs are all over the place. Last week on Pacific Rim, we saw where we heard I Want to Know What Love Is. So it's like they're all over the place. So, but it was great. It was great to hear them, and I think that they were used correctly. There was not a single song that played that I felt was they're playing this just to make people happy. It fit the plot when they were rolling through with it.
Yeah.
So the Oasis gets introduced after the stacks. I thought the stacks was a really good portrayal of what I expected to see. Very dull, lots of browns and dusty.
Yeah.
Dingy, a lot of metals and rust. I thought it was interesting. There are a couple plot holes in the movie, and the first one for me was how many different ways Wade, our main character, had to get down from the stack. So essentially, if you're not really sure what we're talking about, instead of building out, they started building up, like the concept of a skyscraper. You have these trailers that were stacked on top of each other because there was no more room and it was cheaper for everybody to use this. So Wade would climb down, and he had all these different fireman's poles and pulleys and all these ropes to get down. How the hell did he get back up?
I'm assuming there was a ladder system that was just slower.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's just logistically there has to be a solution to this.
I always find myself worrying about these logistical things. It's we have this virtual reality system that literally you can become somebody else, but I'm worried about how does he climb up a building.
Yeah.
That's what I end up finding myself more.
I'm surprised you weren't worried about the plumbing.
The what?
The plumbing in the area.
Oh, yeah.
Because I did wonder how they got the washer and dryer up there, in the trailer. Because at one point he's laying on those, and I'm like, logistically, that would be hard to do. So I kind of get your logic issues.
I don't know. I find myself always focusing on those. Like with last week with Pacific Rim, I was like, well, they were falling down, so then how did they end up sideways? It doesn't matter. There's giant robots and alien monsters. That's what I should be concerned about. But no, I buy that completely. So yeah, and the first like 20 minutes of the movie, and it might have even been longer, was just exposition. There's a lot of characters to introduce. There's a lot of plot to introduce. They have to talk about Anorak or Halliday's quest, who he is, what the Oasis is, and I think it was done well. There were a ton of references dropped as soon as you see Wade put on his glasses or whatever you want to call them, and then he jumps into the Oasis. Yeah. And it's like, then just start the reference reel. It just jumped, starting with Minecraft, which I was like, that's cheap. That wasn't in there. Don't do that. That was
any of them.
I didn't like that reference.
The number of times that Tracer shows up from Overwatch.
I'm like Tracer was not around when this movie or this book came out.
The defense that I have in that, because that was one of the things that would just upset me every time I'd see the trailers, is it's like the book came out in 2011, so, we didn't have Overwatch. And then I go, but realistically, if it were to take place where it's a guy that grew up on this and then died in 2040, odds are he would have been an Overwatch fan.
But my thing with that, too, is he was in 80s and 90s. Like, the Oasis was created... Did it give us a year? That was like 2025 or something like that? I think,
yeah.
So, I guess, Overwatch would have been out, but it's just like... It felt like everything else that he created had nothing to do with current video games.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because they had Borderlands in there, too.
They
shows up, Overwatch,
there was a Gears of War reference with one of the guns later on. She pulled out and it had the chainsaw at the end.
Oh, okay.
There's Gears of War. The references were there. My biggest problem is, it's like, why, when this is your selling point, why is the first one Minecraft? The first video game reference that I saw was Minecraft, and I was like, what the hell?
It's probably because that's the it's probably the easiest world building kind of concept to get people to understand, because adults know what Minecraft is, even if they don't mess around with it.
That's true.
Like, I feel like that's easy. Like, oh, okay, so it's like a virtual version of that, and then they kind of expand out into, and then there are sports, and then there are this, So I don't know. It might have been an easy one, or it might have been the one that just paid the most money.
That's true. That's what I want to know, is how much money did both Spielberg put out to try to get all of these, and then how many companies went to him saying, we will pay you to be in your movie because it's a Spielberg movie and everyone's going to see it.
Exactly. By the way, I want to touch on this. It's kind of just in that realm of sponsorship, but the Pizza Hut drone at the beginning.
Yep.
I laughed so much the first time I watched that, and then I had to try to explain to my friend that that brought Back to the Future 2 level of like, remember the dehydrated Pizza Hut?
Yep. Yep.
And they're like, no, and I'm like, you don't understand this. This is why this is funny to me.
Yep. No, it's funny because like these references are, for somebody like me and probably just as much of you, these are the things that I grew up on. So, like, everybody talks about how this movie has taken everything that we loved about our childhood and crammed it into a movie. It's true. Like,
oh yeah, it's nostalgia.
It is. It's a nostalgia factor. If you haven't read the book and you don't have the pop culture references, you may like the movie still for its plot. But it's the references that, for me, I was like, oh, hey, that. And I would just spend the entire movie looking for them.
Right.
I remember when I first saw the trailer and I saw the Battletoads. It's like, I loved Battletoads. It was such a stupid game, but I loved it. And so seeing Battletoads in, like, real-life CGI as opposed to just this, like, 2D animation...
Right.
...was cool. It was a lot of fun. So, yeah, and we're still not even done with exposition. So we have the quest. They explain IOI, which basically is your corporate bad guys, led by Nolan Sorrento. What did he call him? A dickweed? I think.
There were many things.
Yeah. Nolan Sorrento, and the character, the guy who played him, Ben Mendelsohn, was awesome.
Yeah, he nailed it.
Perfect. And he's the only one that actually kind of resembled his avatar. It's like a souped up, muscled version of himself. But there were some facial features where I was like, this kind of looks like him.
Well, they did well with T.J. Miller's also.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a lot of good elements of his face because you don't actually see him.
You
like,
never
in the
see
real
him.
world.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was able to look at that character and go, oh, okay, that's who that is, that made it nicer.
Yeah.
Because I think that'll give him the recognition of being in that film more so than not.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's like, I don't know how much I felt, and I this could be just not remembering, how much of an important character is IROC in
I don't believe he exists.
I didn't think so either. I was looking. And
they changed a couple of things around I think it helps hasten the plot a little bit.
Yeah.
And creates more of a element. And I might be completely wrong. That's why I was kind of trying to reread the book, was to see what all plot points were missing.
Yeah.
The one for me was, or that were added in also. Cause I don't think that I'm gonna forget her name. The right-hand man, basically.
Yes. I'm trying to remember who you're talking about.
Oh, crap.
It's a weird name.
It's a almost
Finale.
punny, yeah.
Finale Zandor.
Yeah. She, I don't think was in there either.
I didn't remember her
I
at all.
think he basically just needed help because he literally was just a corporate stooge that was trying to go after them. And they worked that angle really well with both of his henchmen, essentially.
Yes.
Because she's like, do you want to do this? And he goes, no, you just handle it, And then he doesn't know how to operate the things that he's asking for in the game realm either. Mm-hmm. So he basically had his two henchmen, one in the real world and one in the Oasis.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too with this character, is that he was not he didn't know what he was doing. Really, his only main connection is that he worked for Halliday. Mm-hmm. So people were like, oh, so he must know Halliday well. If he hadn't worked for Halliday, he never would have gotten into the position.
Exactly.
So that's a good point. Speaking of, so we know these IOI people, we have we've got specific terminology that we need to kind of talk about. They talk about the Sixers a lot. And those are because they are 6 digits. They're numbers. They're not people. So they're called Sixers. There's Gunters, which is egg hunters. And then you have the phrase called zeroing out, which is essentially when you die in the Oasis, it's like any other video game. You lose and you have to start over. It doesn't mean that the game can't continue. That just means that you don't get to continue with all of the powers and gear and money that you had when you started. Those are 3 things that specifically come out a lot. We meet H, Daito, and Sho, which why did they change Sho's name? It wasn't Shoto?
I think so, yeah.
They changed it and shortened it to Sho for some reason.
I think it might be because I think they might have changed his nationality. Because I think they were both Japanese in the original one.
I thought they were.
Which, that's another thing that upset me, but that's fine. The fact that there was no consequence for any of them, because in the book, one of them actually dies.
And I thought we were going to get that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
But there was a time where I thought we were actually going to get that. So, essentially, the movie starts out with all this exposition, and it leads us to Parzival, Wade, however, depending where you want to call him. He ends up going to the first quest, the one that they've discovered, but no one is beaten. A race across New York City in this landscape that if you get into Central Park, then you win. Well, no one's beaten it because of King Kong and T-Rex and all these other things that happen. So he's on his way, Parzival's on his way to that, and he looks for H, and H is in this challenge, which it's important, this specific challenge comes back to play later, but it just shows you a little bit of what the Oasis is, the games that people play there, and really ultimately the real-life consequences that come from something that is just a game. So what were your reactions to this first, not the race specifically, but this first fight on the planet, the Dune planet, and them looking for that first, the gauntlet. I don't remember what they called it. It's something 120.
Okay, yeah.
What were your reactions to that? Because that was like our first one of getting a ton of references outside of that world exposition that we got.
Yeah, it was, they had a couple of characters in there, and I'm sure there's gonna be more every time I watch it, because, like, Freddy and Jason both show up, and that...
There's too many. Like, you could watch any of these scenes about 100 times and still, 101st time, find a new character.
Yeah, it's gonna be one of those movies that the more you watch it, the more you notice.
Yeah.
So, but I enjoyed that, kind of seeing just the scope of what people will do in this world. Mm-hmm. And it was a good way to introduce the concept of zeroing out at that point, because it's like, oh, that makes sense. You know, if you lose everything, that they had the guy that tried to jump out a window.
Yeah.
You know.
And you can see that. Like,
yeah.
And that's cool too, because, you know, he looked like he was higher in, like, financial status than, like, we had the guy who ends up being, what's his name? Rick, who is the boyfriend of Alice, Wade's aunt, who he lives with, where he spent all of his money, which is not much to begin with, on upgrades to win this, whereas zeroing out for one person may not be as
severe.
Life-altering, severe, as zeroing out for somebody else. So it really kind of starts to make you find where's the line for each character. You know, and zeroing out for somebody like Wade, he can't lose it. He doesn't have much to begin with, so he can't lose the very little that he has. But yeah, I thought it was really cool to show, like, the mom who's playing and jumping on the couch, and there's literally a fire in the kitchen. She's like, "Get your dad," and then she dies in the game. It just shows you the different levels of competition, and actually how talented Sho and Daito were, because these guys are just plowing through other characters.
Right.
So then, okay, they're going through that, and we find our way to the race. The race is our first quest for the Copper Key. And I thought this was fun. To me, this was, like, visually, outside of the final battle, I think this was visually my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, it was another one where I was noticing a lot of different references the second time through, just in the vehicles that were on there. And just the whole concept of it, I think, was really interesting. And it was a high-intensity kind of situation. It was a little fanciful with how things would adapt and change in the world. Yeah. But as far as everything goes, you could tell the people that had been doing this for an extended period of time, because they would just get right around everything.
They knew what to expect.
Supposed to surprise them.
Yeah. Yeah, they knew what to expect. And it was... For me, I loved the whole aspect of the changing landscape, because even then, it's like playing. In some of these games, you play it so much that you know, but there's other games that you play that they're a little different each time. It's like a code that is reworked a little bit, so everything is not 100% the same.
Yeah.
What I thought was kind of cool, though, too, is this idea of all these different shortcuts and all these different elements, because if you've ever played a racing game like Mario Kart or Cruisin' USA or any of these, you know there's these, like, hidden alleyways that are going to get you a little further, a little quicker.
Right.
And they had those where I was like, H went up on the bridge.
Yeah.
You know, the H went up and everybody else stayed down low, and down low meant all these, like barricades. Barricades popping up. So I like that. And that's something you don't get if you haven't played racing games, or if you haven't played those. It's like, oh, okay, they're racing.
Also, can we talk about H having Bigfoot?
Well, I thought that was cool. That was really neat. So what were the three? There was Akira's bike. There was essentially Back to the Future.
It was. The only thing that was different was the license plate.
Okay.
It was Parsival's name instead of Out of Time.
So there's that, and then you had Bigfoot. Was there anything else that you noticed?
Well, there's the 66 Batmobile.
Yes, that's right.
The A-Team van's in there.
Was it? I didn't see that.
Is it Mach 5 from Speed Racer? Is that
Mach 5?
Yeah, that was in there. Oh, crap. I think it was the Cadillac from American Graffiti, but I'm not sure.
See, this is the one where I missed I didn't get any references in this one.
I was paying so much more attention to it because I wasn't paying attention to like what was about to happen. I'm just like I was fully focused on there's going to be a shit ton of random stuff here, and I need to see exactly what's happening.
That was me in the final battle, so I'll have plenty of references for the final one. But I didn't see any of these. I don't know why I wasn't looking harder.
So yeah, I was having way too much fun, like looking at the vehicle choices. I also saw Jack on a sign, which I think was just narcissism, noticing that. And I want to say like Spielberg's son's name is Jack or something, and he hides that in things, but I don't remember that. That wouldn't surprise me. Like it wouldn't surprise me, and I feel like I've heard about that reference before, just because I would remember vaguely that because of my name, probably. But there's a reason that was there, and I don't exactly remember what it was.
I kind of feel I was surprised, honestly, that there weren't more Spielberg references.
He wanted to stay away from it.
Did he? There was Jurassic Park.
I read an article about it, and he was like, I don't want to make this like a love letter to my own films.
That's good.
He's like, that I could easily do that, but I don't want to, because nobody wants to see me just talking about myself.
I can respect that, because I mean, when I saw Jurassic Park, I was like, okay, a T-Rex from Jurassic Park. I was like, all right, well, here we go. And that was it. I don't really remember. I mean, there weren't a whole lot of other ones that jumped out to me that had any Spielberg feel to them.
Yeah, I don't recall seeing anything else. And I feel like the T-Rex would have been like the best one for him to do for like a quick reference.
And it wasn't even like a focal point.
No, it was just another obstacle in the race.
Yeah. So we find, this is where we get introduced to Artemis, one of our main characters. She is in this race, and there's a little bit of this quick, almost immediate love reaction between Parsifal, from Parsifal toward Artemis. And that was something, too, that was very different from the book. He was obsessed with her in the book. Mm-hmm. Like, literally obsessed with her. Whereas this one, he just had watched everything that she'd done, but it didn't come off as obsessive. It just came off as, I respect her, like she is the best of the best.
Also, it was good to hear that Twitch was still around.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Of all the things.
Another newer reference, but.
Well, here's something too, and we didn't talk about this, but they said after all of, like, basically the world that they currently live in as a result of, a couple of things, and it was the corn syrup drought. Yes. And the bandwidth wars. And I was like, that's the war. That's the world that we're going to be more worried about, is our Wi-Fi and our artificial sugar.
I really do like my soda. So.
I do too. So. I have my Ready Player One commemorative cup with us today. You can get yours at a local Cinemark near you for only 50 cents more than a large. All right. That's my cheap...
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Maybe Cinemark's going to give me... I've already got the movie pass. I don't think I need. Maybe they'll give me a discount.
Pizza Hut. Remember I mentioned you.
Yeah. So I was like, at this rate, we're going to be like requesting sponsorship from like, I don't even know. I'm afraid of where this might go.
I'll just stop.
So the race ends. Like I said, we've got Artemis, we've got H, we have Parsifal, and the race ends essentially when Parsifal sees, he's not going to beat King Kong, and he grabs onto Artemis and basically prevents her from making the jump, or the attempt to jump over this chasm into the Central Park. Well, and luckily he does, because she would have zeroed out, and because as soon as the bike goes up, Kong grabs it, crunches it, throws it in front of her, and then it's like, okay, well,
you tried.
And she seemed upset, but not as upset as you would expect. She seemed realistically upset. Like, hey, who are you to do this? But then thank you without saying thank you.
Yeah, it was kind of like one of those, you son of a bitch, I coulda, okay, fine.
You're probably right. Yeah, so then this is one of those weird jumps. There are a couple weird jumps where it's just like, hey, the plot needs this to happen, so this is going to happen. Mm-hmm. He's like, I have a friend H who can fix that, and then they're immediately in H's warehouse, which I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense, but it's just like such a quick transition.
Yeah.
But I mean, like you said earlier, and this is probably why we didn't get the keys the way that they were created, and Keys and the Gates, is because this is only a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
It could have easily been turned into a 3-part movie each key
being a
movie. Part of me would be curious to see what that movie would look like, or that trilogy, but a part of me is just happy they gave me what they gave me.
Right.
But they go to H's warehouse, and this is where we get another smorgasbord of references, with all the ships and the Iron Giant,
yes.
Which part of me was a little sad. Just even any reference to Iron Giant, and I start, like, younger me just starts crying, just balled up in the corner.
See, I don't have that emotional attachment to it because I didn't see that until I was an adult.
Oh, man.
So, thankfully for that, because
you were just like, oh, cool, Iron Giant. Like, I've seen that
it's
movie.
Like, oh, I get that reference. Like,
meanwhile, I'm curled up in the fetal position on my chair, just crying. But yeah, it was cool. And he's like, oh, Iron Giant, where'd you get it? And he's like, I'm making it. And you're like, oh, H is pretty much a badass. And I really appreciated the character of H. I think that was my favorite character just because of the reality of it. Parsifal's mixed into this dream world. Artemis is almost the exact opposite, only using the Oasis to get what she wants, which is to take down IOI. And H is just basically this person who's been making all this money off of it because they're really good at what they do, but they know that, hey, girls aren't necessarily girls. They could be, 40-year-old guys named Chuck living in their mama's basement in Detroit.
Yeah. And my favorite, we'll get there with the second key situation, but that was like my favorite moment for H. I related so much.
Oh, yeah. Like, the line, was it personal? Oh, no. Self-care is important.
Yeah.
But
hi, naked ladies. Sorry for interrupting your bath time.
Self-care is very important. That was a funny part.
But yeah, I related to that because I was in the same boat.
Yeah, and I think it's... I don't know. I loved H. Well, and then so there's a big important line in this interaction, and you see Artemis upset with Parsifal because he's basically trying to say, like, oh, I'm really good at this, and she's like, starts quizzing him, like, favorite first person shooter, and starts quizzing him on his knowledge of James Halliday. And then in the corner you see H, who's sitting there and is like using his little eyeglass thing to see the heart rate of, and I don't know heart rates that well, but isn't like 160 pretty high?
Yeah, he was
like borderline heart attack.
Borderline heart attack. It's fine. The corn syrup works probably caused some damage to hearts.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, so Parsifal's freaking out. I mean, he's in love, and so his heart rate's getting close to 160, and then hers is like 56, and I'm like, so she's barely alive. There's no middle ground with these guys. But that was funny, and you see that, he's all freaking out and she's not. And then he steps in and he's like, here you go, here's fixed. And she kind of bails. She's like, all right, I'm out. But she says something that really sticks with him. It's that Halliday doesn't like rules. He didn't want to make rules.
Right.
And that was one of the things that Parsifal said, that Wade had said, is that it's a rule. Like, no one can beat Kong. And that kind of was a rule that we find out later. It's, you weren't supposed to beat Kong.
Right.
You're supposed to go around him. So he goes back to the Oasis library, which I thought was kind of a cool concept. I would spend every day in something like this. Pop culture library.
Oh, yeah.
Just watching movies and playing games. And that was something I was a little disappointed that they didn't include.
Yeah.
From the book.
That was this whole area was a bit more of a change because it was a journal that was originally given out. Like, everybody got it in their inventory, essentially. Yeah. So it was an almanac. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And so it was a written history. And I did like this better.
This was cool.
Because this made more sense almost.
Yes. Especially if you have a digital world, put everything digital.
Right. Yeah. Make it super technological instead of like, here's a document to read. Like, it was more interactive, so it made a better movie experience.
But they only slightly refer to the value of pop culture in this movie. Like, the references are there, but how, like you had said earlier, it brought back, because everybody's looking for all these Easter eggs, it brought back the value of 80s, 90s pop culture, whereas this one just felt like we were giving an homage to 80s, 90s pop culture by including references. So that's one thing I wasn't.
Yeah, because none of the challenges really needed a pop culture knowledge. It needed more of a knowledge of him as a person.
Yes.
And that was a difference.
Completely different. The book, and that's something that I recommend people to read the book for, is because, where you have your film sync, where you have to step into the movie and act the part of that person for the entire movie. You have to know the movie so well that you can move like they move, say what they say, and act like they act. Like, that's a true, complete knowledge of
It was War Games, was the movie in the book.
Yeah, War Games.
Yeah.
And then in this one, they walk through the building that is The Shining, like the hotel. That's it. It wasn't the same experience. So I missed out on the value of pop culture. And so when Parzival goes to the Halliday Library, the library in the Oasis, he sits and he looks at this conversation between Ogden Morrow, Halliday's former partner, and he's kind of discussing about how, like, I don't want to leave the company, but you're kind of forcing me to. And he's like, you can't go back. On some people, things just move forward. And Parzival's like, all right, we'll see you. And then it seemed like overtly obvious. There were a lot of these like plot points where it's like, here's your hint. Like, somebody had to have seen that before. Right. In my opinion.
Yeah, but they might not have realized it. Like, I mean, there's a lot of it. There were a lot of MacGuffins,
yes,
like, in this. And again, I think that plays into the fact that the book was so elaborate, and you're having to get everything condensed down to, I think it's 2 hours and 18 minutes of runtime. So
yeah, that's right. I don't know. A part of me had been waiting for this. Once I found out that they were doing Ready Player One, I was so excited, like 3 years ago when I first found out.
Yeah.
And it's not that the movie didn't deliver, but we're finding a lot of things, like, they had to change it. They had to. If they don't, they're getting themselves into a multiple movie or a 3 hour runtime minimum and still cutting things out.
Right.
But yeah, so he goes back, he finds out because he says, can't we just go back, put the pedal to the metal and just go as fast as we can? And he says it so clearly obvious that Parzival's like, oh, so I need to go backwards in the race. So the second time he goes through, everyone goes forward, and he goes backward.
And Artemis knows that something's up.
Well, yeah.
Because he won't talk to her.
Like, you know something. Like, what's going on? And then it starts, and she bolts, and she sees that he's not going anywhere, and sees he starts to go back. And that's what's kind of cool is I loved this. We see the race a second time. The exact same race, essentially, we saw the first time. But we see it from the perspective of kind of like the question master, the gamekeeper kind of style of, all right, well, here's these challenges that are going to get thrown out. It's like if you're into like SimCity or Minecraft, you kind of got to see this level being created underneath the level.
Right.
It's kind of a cool technical thing.
It was a real artistic way to show how you're supposed to do this, because there was no obstacle for him because it didn't exist yet.
Yeah.
But it was there to be up at the. It was weird.
And then also too, like the way in which Kong like crashes. Kong was roaring into the ground, almost like that was built in for whoever was going at that point, because Kong was mad that they had figured it out.
Yeah,
and it's kind of a cool little twist on the scenario we saw before. But he keeps going back and backs right into Central Park and gets the first key. And for me, this is again where I was a little upset, because the key leads to the clue, which leads you to the second key. The gates didn't matter. There were no gates in this movie. The gates, well, they had them a couple times, but the gate was not another challenge. The gate was just, here's a gate, you have the key, there you go.
Yeah.
Now go find the next key. It lessened the fun, I think, that we could have had, because the challenge, like the race, I loved the race challenge. Mm-hmm. I loved the third challenge. The second one, I don't know. But I loved the first challenge specifically because it felt like a game. The second one didn't feel like a game. The third one was, but it was more of like knowing your history.
Yeah.
But I loved the first one.
It was a proving your worth was the third one.
So I don't know. But we start to see, okay, now that Parzival has this key, he's on everybody's radar. because he's the only one until Artemis gets it, and then he tells H, who tells Dido, who tells Sho. So you have these 5. So this is where we kind of start to see IROC for one of the first times. He has, which I think is hilarious, IROC, who is, like we said earlier, voiced by TJ Miller, from what I remember and what Jack remembers, is not in the book. Do you think IROC was important, though, for this telling of this story?
The way that they developed it, I think it made a lot of sense because he helped advance the plot in ways that would have been harder to do almost.
Yeah, I agree.
So I was upset first viewing, second viewing, it's like, okay.
Well, he provided comedic relief that we kind of got from H, but this isn't, I mean, it wasn't like this movie was dramatic, but IROC's character was funny. He's the guy sitting in his basement who has been trolling people because he's just really damn good at playing this game, and he's basically your troll.
Yeah.
And he's like, how are things? He's like, well, I kind of got a kink in my neck. He's like, can you actually stand to the right, your left? And it's like, he's just destroyed somebody, and he's there as this kind of assassin, mercenary, and he's talking about a kink in his neck. Like, it was ironic, and that was what was funny about his character. I don't know if I would have missed him not being there, but I don't know.
I can see that. I think if they wouldn't have had him, it would have made Sorrento more of a menacing character because he would have had to have stepped into that, or had loyalty senator woman that I forgot her name again already. I'm the worst. Fanal.
Yeah.
If they would have had her popping in and like being both sides of it.
Yeah, they made it very clear though that her work had nothing to do with the Oasis.
Yeah.
Like, she was off doing this, and then you had IROC that was off doing his side, and then Sorrento was kind of the middleman. He was able to go back and forth.
Right.
And okay, so this is where we start to see the building of, and going through this, the next mention is of the high five, because they kind of start doing their thing together. The movie doesn't actually refer to them as the high five until the very end, though, does it? Or did I miss a reference somewhere? Because they talk about it later in the movie, and you have like signs, the high five.
Yeah, how did they get those signs so quickly? I'm really proud of their ingenuity.
I'm proud of the fact that they were able to, and so many. Like, how long were they in that van?
Yeah,
It wasn't just like one or two people who came prepared.
There was confetti. Yep. There was a lot of, but we're getting ahead of things. But yeah, it was just like,
But yeah, so that was one of those things too, is it seems like everybody knows them as the high five, but the movie forgets to actually call them that until the end.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of weird.
It might have just been because, like, high score, and they were the 5 people on the high score list. Like, I don't know. I'm adding logic to this. Whenever you have to add the logic, there's something wrong.
There's a little bit, yeah. So not a major plot hole. It's more of our, like, logistical, hey, we are not really sure how things worked out. But this is where we find ourselves learning more about the second key. We start kind of figuring out, well, okay, now we have this, and we're trying to figure out where to go with it. And so you have the Oasis Library comes into play again, and you have Parzival talking about Kira, who is the wife of Ogden Morrow, Halliday's former partner. And this is where we have the date conversation that they have in the library.
Right. I do want to point out that I thought it was great how the library was, like, abandoned. Mm-hmm. And then once somebody found a key, that library was busy as all get out.
Yep. Again, yeah. Well, they even said, like, as soon as it came out, everybody went there.
Right.
And then you only had the Gunters and the Sixers who cared. And the Sixers didn't even go to the library because they had their own team who studied that.
Right.
Which, I don't know, maybe I missed this, but they were called oologists. Why were they called oologists?
I don't know.
Because they said you have your team of oologists, and actually on the back of when they first showed them, you see oology, like Sector 2 oology. And I don't know. I'm trying to think of like what it would have been, because it's Halliday Oasis There we go.
Yeah.
We're
we
realizing
figured out
things.
the logic.
There it is, guys. You guys just saw the aha moment for both of us. Oasis, Oology. Yeah, that one shouldn't have been that hard.
Well.
We're smart. We're so smart. But they're at this library, and it's funny to see Artemis's reactions, because she clearly didn't do her research. Because she's like finding out all this information. She's like, no way, they weren't together, and like she's freaking out. And you start to see that Sorrento had worked for as an intern for Halliday and Ogden for Morrow, and so you start to see this concept of he was trying to sell. He's already seeing this as Sorrento's seeing this as a cash cow. Like you can have gold level and platinum level, and like clearly water would be the top because it's Oasis, right? I'm like, that's so stupid.
But I could definitely hear his character saying that as like a completely legitimate idea.
It gave more levels to his character. It made sense there as his character. But then you start to hear about Kira, who is that's her gamer tag, but it's
Karen.
Karen Underwood, and we find that that's the only reference in all of the library of Kira or Karen Underwood. So that's why you see Parzival's thinking this is important, because everything else has been removed.
Right. And that was when the curator bets him that's not the only reference.
And we get our quarter bet. And this quarter bet comes back, so hold on to that. So we find that he gets a quarter for winning. It is the only reference, even though he believes that it is not the only. The curator thinks, oh no, it was very important to both these people. But it's kind of like they're figuring some things out. Artemis says, hey, and I can't remember the name of the place, but it was the nightclub. I can't remember the name of it, but it's this nightclub that had been created, one of the first places that was created in one of the worlds of the Oasis. And she's like, hey, meet me here. I'm going to show you something. And we break away to the conversation between H and Parzival, where he's trying to get ready for this. And that's where you have the wonderful Chuck line, which I still think is one of my favorites.
That was the best line.
But that's the thing too, is you never know who it is that you're talking to when you're talking to somebody random online. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that prevents them from being anybody they want to be, and that's kind of the appeal of the Oasis.
Great to know that catfishing still exists in 2045.
It does.
So
it just got more involved.
Also, in that scene, I noticed something the second time that was great. There was a reelect Mayor Goldie Wilson
was there?
Poster on the wall, and I was like, yes.
That's one of the things. Look at the walls, because I remember seeing. There were like tons of Rush posters, and which is important in the book. You have to go through.
There was also a Joust poster.
There's a Joust poster. Yep. And I think they gave reference and homage to the book, knowing that they weren't going to be able to do everything from it.
Yeah, I could definitely agree with that.
So this is where we find, and I have to admit, this is one of the references I had no idea. What does he go up dressed as?
Buckaroo Banzai.
Yeah, so Buckaroo
Banzai. I want to
I
see this movie because I've never seen it. It's an actual thing. It's a really long title. It's like something about the continued adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, and I think there's an 8th in there somewhere.
Yeah, the adventures of Buckaroo Banzai across the 8th dimension. I've never even heard of this movie, and that says a lot because I know my pop culture. This one, not at all.
I do remember that was mentioned in the book very explicitly.
Okay.
Though. Because I remember reading it and going, well, that's a new one. And then I was going to look into it and I never did. So maybe now I will.
Yeah, now I got to check it out. But he goes dressed as Buckaroo Banzai.
After being Prince and
Michael Jackson and Duran Duran. Yeah. And Punk. Which I was like, if you're going to throw all these specific ones, why just go generic Punk? Like, throw another reference in there, but I guess Punk was enough. So yeah, we get him dressed up as Buckaroo Banzai, and he goes off to this nightclub. He meets, it's this, we skipped over this because it really wasn't major and important, but after he gets the first key, he gets 100,000 credits.
Oh, yes.
And he goes and buys things with these credits. He gets a holy hand grenade.
The suit that he wears.
The suit, which is like the bodysuit, which essentially, it's kind of similar to what you have with gaming consoles nowadays, where you can buy a console and then get off-brand, remote controls, or like if you're playing Rock Band or Guitar Hero, you don't have to have a specific guitar for it. It just has to be compatible.
Right.
And so he has this suit made of like tons of random things that were kind of like created and sold and modified. But now that he has all this money, he can get this full bodysuit that can have impact sensors for everything. Especially the one that I love that they had this. I don't remember this at all in the book, but the crotch sensor.
Yes. Which was a plot point multiple times.
Exactly. It's like 3 times as a plot point. Like, I know crotches are important, but come on now.
And then the other item, which I'm really upset that I didn't get this until after I read somewhere about it.
Yeah.
The Zemeckis Cube.
Yes.
Which I didn't understand why it was named that until after I read about it. Because it made total sense with what that item does.
Mm-hmm.
It puts the user back in time 60 seconds. And Zemeckis is the guy that created Back to the Future.
Yep, Robert Zemeckis.
And it's like, oh god, that's a great reference. And it's like obscure enough. Like, as soon as I read that, I'm like, that's correct. Like, oh, that's really sharp. Because up to that point, we really hadn't had any, like, I feel super stellar references that weren't like
they were blunt.
hand-fed.
Yes, they were very blunt up to that point.
This one was a very obscure, like, there was another layer to it that I hadn't caught. Mm-hmm. And so I was really ashamed of myself because it's like, they're hand-feeding me so much that I'm like, okay, this is fine, this is what I'm gonna get. And then afterwards, it's like, oh, that's why that was that. Like,
and they don't, and that's how the book was, and how I kind of wanted more of the movie. Is they don't call attention to it. They just call it the Zemeckis Cube, and it's a Rubik's Cube, and you're like, all right, cool. And that's all that it is.
They didn't even tell you what it does.
No.
Until after it was used. And one thing about the book, if you're thinking about reading it, one thing that I forgot about, but I started reading it again a little bit after watching the movie, to see how many differences there were and everything. They use footnotes.
Yes.
To explain things. So you get a little additional detail into the visuals or anything like that. So,
yeah, and so that's the thing is if you are looking at reading the book because you like the movie or you're interested in it and you want to read more, I love it. Ernest Cline to me really hit the nail on the head with Ready Player One. He did come out with the second one, Armada, which did not get as much positive criticism, but just I think it was in comparison there is only one book like Ready Player One.
Right.
But if you're like kind of hesitant because you're thinking, well, I don't know any of these references, well, it does give you a little bit of help. It doesn't completely throw you into the water and say, what you get, you get. So it's kind of a cool thing to keep in mind.
The thing that would be great, and I'm sure it exists on the internet somewhere, is literally a list of every movie that's referenced, every, like everything. So you could actually research it and like watch it. And
I'm sure it's out there somewhere.
The internet has everything.
It does. So they're at this nightclub, and you see there's a lot of things that happen here that are quite important. You start to see the romantic interest between both characters of Artemis and Parzival start to build up a bit more. Mm-hmm. This is the first time the crotch sensors come into play. And like she went right for it. I was like, that's impressive. So they're up flying. They basically are at this nightclub because they think this is where the Jade Key is. They jump into this like gravity sphere area that's in the middle of this club, thinking that maybe since they have the copper keys, it'll do something. It doesn't. They start floating and they start dancing. And she's like, "Did you come prepared, Parzival?" And I was like, she's asking him if he brought a condom, pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. It was very, very overt.
And he's like, yeah, I guess. And so she starts like touching him and saying, "Can you feel this? Can you feel that?" And it's cool because like when you go and you look at him in the real world, you see the blue of where she's touching him and you can see her handprint. So like, yes, that's like she's holding onto his arm, but then she like is floating through his legs and like rubs his crotch. I was like, this is a first date. This is essentially a first date. She's going straight for it. I'm like,
I do think there was reasoning behind it for her. Because I feel like she needed him on her side because she, like, you find out what her reasoning is after this.
The quickest way to a man is through his crotch sensor.
Yeah, that's basically what it is. And so I'm going to reward him so he stays on my side here and I can win him over, I think is what was happening.
I think it was like some James Bond seduction.
That's what I'm hoping. Like, that makes make more sense than, more like, sense. First date, like, hey.
Yeah. And then immediately after that, he's in love, which, he's like, I love you, and I want you to know my name. And it's important to know that IROC is at this as well.
Yes.
And he's basically sitting in this, we have this little VIP section, and he's listening to their conversation. And as soon as he says his name, he's like, oh, I know that you should not have said that. And so now he's got his in, which also pisses Artemis off. She's like, you don't tell me that. You don't tell anybody that. You don't know who I am. Which kind of feeds into what you were saying, where she's trying, she knows he's important. She knows that he's somebody who could eventually win this thing. And if he tells his real name, he could be killed. He could be, at least put in danger. And immediately after that, IOI busts in and starts shooting at everybody. And it's kind of weird because then you have IOI who's shooting at them and they're kind of avoiding them. But then IROC starts shooting and there's no like, who is this guy? They're just like, oh, I'm going to shoot him back. Like, no one else in the entire club fought against Artemis and Parzival except for IROC. And they don't make any mention specifically. Granted, they're in a tight spot, so they're not going to sit and say like, oh, who is he?
Right.
But I felt like, at least even later, there was no reference to who this guy was until we see him come back later in the third challenge.
Right. Unless maybe they just thought that it was some opportunistic guy that wanted to get some credits.
Those people exist, so potentially.
Because we described him as a troll. He looks kind of trollish. Like,
he's got a weird, like, skull body with holes in it, and it's...
So, it could very well have been just like, oh, look at this asshat. Like, yeah,
somebody who's like, oh, these two clearly are going to have a lot of coins because they won these keys. And
right, it's like, IOI is not shooting at me, so it's fine. Like,
that's true. And so this is where we see the Zemeckis cube come into play. He throws it up and he's like, oh, what's that? He's like, oh, it's a Zemeckis cube. Put you back 60 seconds in time. She's like, you just using that now? And then it like rewinds everything back. I don't know why it doesn't impact her though.
Was he holding her hand when it happened? Because that tends to be a reason why things don't impact people. Maybe. Is like if there's body contact at the time.
That might be true. I don't remember.
Because it's how Kitty Pryde can phase other people through walls. Like, maybe it's that situation.
But I was like, if everybody else is impacted by this, then why isn't she? And then, what also kind of confused me was, so after they throw up the Zemeckis cube, they both are then able to, like, go down into the entrance. Mm-hmm. And some time goes by where she's yelling at him, basically saying, this is a game to you and this is real life to me.
Right.
We find out about her dad passing away in a loyalty center, basically internment camp. Mm-hmm. But yet then everything should have continued after the 60 seconds.
Right.
And you don't see any explosions. IOI doesn't come back in. You feel like they should have gotten out of there, but they're hanging out in this entryway.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe they just assumed they, like, took their visors off or something. Because that'll just bug you out.
Which makes me wonder, like, why didn't they just immediately take their visors off anyway?
I don't know.
Maybe
there was a lot of times where, like, maybe it's, like, an active combat situation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah. Like, you can't pause the game when you're... Or you can't, like, teleport out if there's baddies in the room.
Yeah, it's like when you can't sleep in Fallout because there's an enemy nearby. It's like, oh god.
I just want to save. Nope, you gotta... Yeah, you can't save. The save points. So at this point, then, IROC says, he gives the Wade Watts identity away to Sorrento, and Sorrento's like, oh, okay. So Sorrento then sends a deal. He sends this notification to Wade saying, I want to give you everything. You'll still get the egg. If you want to talk to me, touch the prism. And he, like, touches the prism, and he then shows up as a hologram. There's a lot to this conversation that happens. What did you, before I go into what I thought about it, what did you think about this conversation? Because it's a really large turning point for the plot.
It had a lot of information in it and a lot of layers to it, which was good. I liked that he tried to test him on things, you know. It was very much both sides weren't showing their full hand.
Yes.
And I think there was consideration still on the side of Parsival Wade, you know.
Like, well, and he has the emotion
dampening technology or whatever.
Which I'm like, well, yeah, but it's kind of weird because then he like freezes. So he freezes and he's like, oh, clearly, and Sorrento even calls attention to it. He's like, yeah, you're probably right to use that. But what I didn't understand in that, just because we're talking about that, he takes off his visor, but he doesn't go away. He does it a couple times in the movie. Do you have to take it like completely off your head or something? Because like he put it up whereas like his visor would be up on his forehead but still be on, and then he put it back and he'd be where he is. Where we just talked about if you pull off your visor,
I think you have to like pull it completely off.
Okay,
like,
that might be.
Well, we'll just assume there's like a mercury switch or something in there where like it has to be turned a certain way to turn off. I don't know.
There you go.
But
or maybe there's a switch that you press. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There were so many levels to this conversation. Where you had the upper hand started with Sorrento because he has this offer, and then you have the testing, which I love a good Fast Times at Ridgemont High reference. Have you ever seen that one?
I've not.
Oh,
no.
You got your early Sean Penn. You've probably seen multiple references throughout. Like I think Family Guy's done a reference of it, where you have the friend comes in and goes. It's the girl in the pool with the red bikini, and she like gets out of the water. I think Family Guy did it with Peter actually at one point. But she gets out of the pool all slow like, and they have this like music playing, and she takes off her bra, and this is all a fantasy that you actually find out is being created by the older brother who's watching them out in the pool. Okay. But there's that reference. There's the reference of Spinelli. But it's Sean Penn's in it, and it's a really funny movie. But it's the forgotten one of all of these others. So you have your Animal House that they reference, Ferris Bueller, Breakfast Club. But most people don't know Fast Times. Fast Times is awesome. So if you haven't yet seen that, go check that one out. But you have this back and forth. And then it goes to Parsival having the upper hand because he's like, I know you're listening to your oologist. And then he goes, well, don't worry about it, Wade. And it's like, oh shit, he knows my name.
Right.
And this is where you see Sorrento's real side come out. Where he's like, you won't be missed.
Right.
No one's gonna worry about, and this is where it gets a little real because it's like, in the grand scheme of things, who's gonna care if 100 people in Columbus, Ohio die? And that's kind of one of those sad and scary parts about our world now is it's like, something happens, how quickly do we move on from it?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. And he's like, I'm not there, because he doesn't realize, he thinks he's gonna kill Wade.
Right.
He doesn't realize that when he goes into the Oasis, he's in his little hideout,
right.
little ways away. But this is one of the really, like, there's not a whole lot of, like, emotional, dramatic moments in the show. This is really the one that jumps out to me. The fear and the kind of frustration and just worry that comes over Wade when he knows that the stacks are going to be blown up or something's going to happen to them.
Yeah, it was his first realization, I think, of real-world consequence for his notoriety in the Oasis.
And he runs away. He's trying to save his aunt. Rick answers, and I didn't understand this, but it seemed like he tried to play nice, because Rick had his suit on.
Yeah.
But then he had his suit on later, so I was like, oh, he didn't steal the suit. He must have bought him a suit.
Yeah.
To be like, maybe if I do this, you won't be such a dick.
Right.
Didn't matter because he goes, I never want to see you again. And he doesn't because then stacks blow up and he dies.
Right.
So he got what he wanted.
Yeah.
He did.
It's really his fault.
It's all Rick's fault. So the stacks blow up and then Parsival goes, or Wade goes and says, like, he's calling out his other four and he's like, they came after me. They're going to come after you too. And that's where he gets kidnapped. Very quickly we find out, though, it's not kidnapped by anybody dangerous. It's by Artemis and her goons, her henchmen, her supporters, I guess. If they're good guys, they can't be goons or henchmen. And this was another moment that kind of upset me. In the book, He doesn't meet Artemis till the end.
Yeah, well, in the book, they all kind of get taken in by Morrow.
Yeah.
Like, he basically saves all of them. Like, come here, they won't find you here.
Yep.
I want you guys safe. And that doesn't happen in this. And it seems really convenient that she's also in Columbus. Like, everybody is Columbus. Apparently. Yeah. Whereas in the book, he starts out in Oklahoma City. Mm-hmm. You know, they start out in Oklahoma City, he moves to Columbus, and then he ends up in Oregon. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot more of the world seen. And I think, again, it came down to, you know, compressing all of this information into one thing, and what's easier than just being able to have everybody there.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of those things that... for me, it didn't make sense when you have two of your characters of Asian descent who are just happening to be in Columbus, Ohio.
Right.
That didn't make sense.
I don't know if... By the time they got there, I don't know how much time had elapsed from his initial message to when he when he runs into them, essentially. So maybe they did fly out there.
But it seemed like, too, that I didn't understand that aspect of it because you had... I think it was Daito had said, like, we got Artemis's message, and she sent it out, like, minutes before they showed up.
Right.
So I don't know if that was the message that she sent, or if she maybe sent a message before that when she found him. We'll have to
just leave that up. That could have been, too, because he was trying to send a message, and I don't think his got out because he got nabbed.
Yeah.
So, as soon as you get there, maybe she gives the same message, or it's even, like, worse. Like, we just need to handle this now, kind of a thing, So, then he's rescued by Artemis, and they have this conversation. You see that she has this big birthmark on her face, so she's worried that he's not going to like her. You start to get some romantic elements thrown in there because it's a movie. But out in this discussion, there's this aha moment. There's this moment where she's like, oh shit. And it was very Spielberg to me. I was like, that's a Spielberg thing where you're having a serious moment and then it's like, oh my god, something I'm just reminded of. And a change in music and it just... Yeah.
She's like, Kira's the key. And so then they decide that they need to go to the Oasis library because they need to find out something about Kira and that date. It wasn't, they were thinking too literal. It was not that the jump was literally a leap. It was metaphorical.
Yeah.
So I think this is a good time because we're getting close to the Jade Key, and then after the Jade Key, it kind of runs really close to the end. So this will be a good time for us to take our halfway break. Go ahead and refill your popcorn. Go and get your Sour Patch Kids and everything like that. Refill yourself at the lobby, and we will see what is coming up soon from Eventide.
If there's one thing that's true about wrestling fans, it's how much they like to talk about wrestling. Join Aaron Lopez and Ben Norsworthy for the Top Rope Wrestling Podcast.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Tune in every episode and be ringside as these two break down all of the big matches in the world of professional wrestling. Brought to you by Eventide Entertainment. You know, there's nothing quite as satisfying as a good conversation with intelligent company. Join comedian Don Smith every week as he sits down and talks with comedians, actors, filmmakers, writers, and everyday schmoes. It's The Life with Don Smith, Wednesdays at noon on 106.9 FM, and now available on the Eventide Entertainment podcast feed every Friday on Spreaker, YouTube, and iTunes.
We are back. We are just about to talk about The Shining and the Jade Key in the second challenge. This is the closest thing that I felt we got to the film sync concept we talked about earlier.
Right.
With the War Games.
Maybe they couldn't get the rights to War Games?
They got the rights to The Shining, so why didn't they just, have them run through The Shining? I don't know.
Well, you could run through The Shining, kind of.
Yeah.
Like, they had a lot of elements of it, but you didn't actually need to do any of them, essentially. But if you didn't know what you were doing, you would go for them.
Yeah.
And I related very much to H in this scene, because I've never seen The Shining. I don't do well with horror films. And so I know enough to have gotten some of the references.
But if you had to live through it, you like
I would be a mess.
Yeah.
I would be absolutely
no idea what to expect.
Everything that happens to H in that scenario was very I feel like it would be a slightly less brave version of that would be me.
Yeah, you see two little girls who are looking very nice and dapper and sweet, and you're like, "Oh, little girls, what's going on?"
It's like, help me out, little girls.
Hey, how are you?
And then everything goes wrong.
Yeah. And it's really cool. Like, I loved this scene. This whole Shining scene was cool. I just was disappointed because the film sync concept from the book was probably one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, it was great.
Because I grew up loving movies. Clearly, being the host of this podcast, I love my movies. So to be able to say, like, I would have to live a movie, or like recreate it by stepping in, almost as like a role playing style game, I think that'd be cool as shit. So we kind of saw that, but it never really jumped to where it needed to. Ultimately, they find out that the Jade Key is going to be attained by going to the ballroom, which is the dance where Halliday never took the leap of kissing Kira, and they go there, and it was kind of cool. And I don't know if they got pulled out because they go and Artemis takes the leap. You see all these zombies that are dancing in a very similar way to the nightclub. And then Kira is with one of them dancing. Yes. So you're like, I've got to get to her. So she jumps and they all get pulled out. Do you think they got pulled out because the timer went off? Or do you think they got pulled out because only one of them could do it at a time?
I feel like only one could do it at a time.
That's kind of what I thought.
Because if the timer would have went out, you would think that everybody would have been knocked out.
Yes.
Of it. So yeah, I think it was very much a one person gets a chance, because the concept of what she had to do would make it very hard if two people were going to try.
Very true.
So I think that was the point there, was it's just one person at a time. And
yeah, I that's what I was thinking too. I just wanted to kind of see what you thought there. So actually, Artemis then becomes the furthest, and that's good because that's what happens in the book. Like, at one point, Artemis overtakes Parzival. She figures things out first, and it gets to a point then where you're like, okay, well then Parzival gets it, and everybody else. So the five are working together to continue their quest, and this is where we find out that that Wade's still alive. Sorrento believes that he's dead, and from the stacks, and he's not. He's alive, and so they are like, okay, well, let's figure out where they're at. And very quickly, they figure out where Artemis's hideout is, and they raid it. The IOI does. We kind of talked about this earlier, but you've got Artemis and Wade, who are in the real world. They get away. Samantha, Artemis, sacrifices herself, essentially, gives herself up in order for Wade to get away.
And she says, one day you'll forgive me for this.
Yes, which is a good, important callback to later on. So he goes out and immediately then is caught up by H, which we find out is not a large black man, who it kind of seems like it's going to be from the voice, but actually Helen, who, if you have seen, we were talking about it earlier, but if you've seen Master of None, the Netflix show, and I might be saying her last name wrong, but Lena Waithe is in that. She's the black actress with the dreadlocks from Master of None. She's a great actress, and I should have known it. Like we had said,
yeah,
that voice sounded familiar as H, but then it kind of came out, and you're like, oh shit, of course that's her.
It's not the most upsetting voice, but not realizing it thing.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was one of those things where it's like, oh, right, that makes total sense now.
Yeah.
Like,
voice sounds like that.
Yeah, it's just a deeper version of her voice.
Yeah.
And, everything that she said is something that you could imagine that actress saying.
Mm-hmm. And in the style. It's
like
her talking.
Self-care is important.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that seems
So this is where we meet the real H, the real Daito, and the real Sho, finding out that and Daito is a subtle, stereotypical version of a Japanese teenager.
Yeah,
like he bows, he talks in broken English, but not awful broken English. Mm-hmm. Which I don't know. I felt like that if he would have been just an Asian American, it would have made more sense to me because of, I think, our discussion earlier about how quickly, if he's in Japan, there's no way he's getting to Columbus, Ohio, even in a week.
We're very concerned about logistics.
We really are. You know, don't give me a sci-fi fantasy without some reality, damn it. Oh man. Yeah, who cares? Who cares? Daito and Sho are there. Sho is an 11-year-old, and I love Sho, the character. He doesn't say much. He's got like 3 lines in the whole movie.
But they're all gold.
Like, what should I, yeah, I'm 11, so what? He's like, no, it is important that you're 11. You're probably the coolest 11-year-old ever. And then Daito goes, he knows. He's like, he already knows. Like, shh, let him tell me.
But let him tell me,
like, of course I know, but I like people telling me I'm awesome.
Positive affirmation's great. Like, yeah.
Especially when you're 11. And running from a huge organization trying to kill you. So Artemis is, like we said, she's captured. She's taken to a loyalty center, much like her dad, which is kind of a cool character thing. It doesn't it doesn't get explored much, but if you've been paying attention, you see the connections. And this is where very quickly, and this one this was another one of those very quick, abrupt plot points. It's like, oh yeah, so IOI figured out where the third key is. They're just trying to figure out how to get to it now. We just got the second key, and now the third key is figured out.
Yeah, they touched on the explanation of it a little bit. Like, we got the repeat of the information for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it was, oh, by the way, totally know what it is now. We have to, get there.
Yeah.
It just hastened the plot along again.
It was one of those, plot point things that they figured out, and they're like, all right, yeah, we just gotta run it along. And this is when we start to see, like I said, that third key, and they talk about the Castle Anorak, which is the final place. When we first met Irok, we saw him talk about the orb of, was it Azeroth?
Yeah.
Sounds right. Which is apparently a D&D reference. I don't play D&D, but those of you D&D listeners out there, I believe this is a D&D reference. And this orb is being set up to basically protect this castle from anybody on the outside. So they basically are saying anybody on the inside has the opportunity to win this final key. Everybody on the outside, sorry, you're out of luck. And we see this whole setup of they're using this slave labor, essentially, the loyalty center, including Artemis now, to lay out these charges and do all this work to protect them from any outsiders. Mm-hmm. I felt like there was a lot of setup and not as much delivery with this final battle. It felt like it just happened. I mean, I thought it was done very well, but the actual delivery of it in comparison, the setup was just it just ran so quickly. It's like, hey, before I'm getting ahead of ourselves a little bit. What did you think about the hijacking of Nolan's feed? Because that happens before the final battle. That
was, I think, really well done because you've already established that H is amazing at building things.
Yes,
she fixed the bike in 10 minutes.
She said 10 minutes, but it was 2.
Yeah, it was just, okay, got this. We're good. And so there was just that level of knowledge and expertise. And it was, if you can explain his setup to me, we've got this. Mm-hmm. And it was done. They did it so well that I didn't realize that was the plot point until they gave it away.
Yeah.
It's oh, okay, they just broke into the center. That's weird that they didn't, show them getting into there.
Any of it, yeah.
But it was like they have a lot of ground to cover, so I guess that makes sense. Like, I justified it in my head.
Well, because they'd done it before. They had a couple of those like quick shifts that you didn't really need all of the answers. You could kind of just go with it because the plot had led you to that point.
Right, and you'd only seen them in the real world so far. Or at that point. Like, the last time you saw them was all talking in the real world. Mm-hmm. So, it made sense. I did think it was weird. It seemed like Dido's eyes were glowing.
Yes, that's true. That was one of the things I noticed too. They were like gold almost.
Yeah. And so that was weird to me. But I was just like, maybe it's just weird lighting. Or, maybe they have futuristic contact lenses. Like, again, with the justifications.
Well, and that's something too. I noticed that because that happened with Sorrento's character often too, where his eyes would go from glowing blue to glowing gold. Like, they would go back and forth. Mm-hmm. So I was like, oh, that's weird. That's kind of like Sorrento's eyes. They looked weird right now. So that clearly was not enough of a giveaway for him because he didn't notice it. It was when he noticed. I'm like, why didn't they close the door?
Maybe they thought it would automatically close.
I don't know. But, like, again, logistics. Yeah. But basically Sorrento looks over his shoulder, and then the reflection of his...
setup.
His setup, yeah. He sees, like, in this little mirror, he sees behind him, and he sees that this is fake. He's like, oh, you guys are hijacking my feed. And he knows immediately what they're doing. And Dido's like, uh-oh, guys.
But they already had gotten the information they needed from him at that point.
Yes, at that point, they've released Artemis, of which she says, no, I'm going to stay, but she doesn't stay, at least in her loyalty pod. So we kind of start to see the progression. She is going to stick around in the IOI Center. She's going to try to break this orb by getting the information off of his setup. And then she's going to try and then, in the War Center, they call it, infiltrate her way into it and destroy the orb by repeating this chant, this...
By the way, can we just have a moment to admire the like depth of his password?
Oh, what was it? What was it again? It was Bossman69.
Yeah,
but the 0 and the O and the
055.
Yeah, Bossman69. Which, how many of us can say we didn't at some point or another in our lives use 69 in a very mature username way?
Yeah, it was just very, very funny. I was like, of course it is.
Bossman69. Yeah, I thought that was hilarious.
And just the post-it note with the password. It's like, well, some things never change.
Well, I remember my grandma would put her passwords like on the front of her computer. Well, granted, the only person using her computer is her and like her like grandkid. I'm like, I don't care about my grandma's password. I need to get onto the internet. I don't need to know what her email is.
Right.
So like we've seen those people, but when you're the head of a major organization that is trying to basically conquer the world's financial, landscape, your password shouldn't be hanging out on your chair.
It was very interesting, but I was like, having worked in IT before, I'm like, that happens more than it should. Like,
yeah, because and you clearly, with all the things that he's doing in his life, he can't remember Bossman69.
Yeah, that's too much. It's probably because they made him add the numbers.
Yeah, he would have been cool with Bossman.
Yeah,
but so yeah, they trick him into releasing enough information to getting Artemis, getting Samantha out. But then she's got a plan, and she says, "I'm going to go and do this. You need to raise an army." So you have the first monologue, the Braveheart monologue, basically, where he stands up and he's sending out this message, this live feed to everybody saying, we can't let Sorrento do this. If you care about the Oasis, come fight. And I got so annoyed because the girl next to us, as soon as this feed comes down, and you've got H is the Iron Giant who's there, you've got Sho next to him, and you have Parsifal in the middle, and they're like standing there. You see like this wide landscape, and no one's coming, and they're like, "Denied." I'm like, "Shut up! You know what's gonna happen." I was so annoyed with them. Anyways, yeah, they eventually then everybody comes in, and this is where you start to see the references upon references upon references. Every character possible gets crammed into this, and literally you can only see maybe like 1/8 or much, much less than that. There's going to be so many that we're going to see in the future if watching this second, third, fourth time.
Seeing Sanrio characters beat people up, though, was really, really happy for me.
I'm pretty sure I saw Pokemon in there.
I was having fun with the Hello Kitty universe.
Yep.
That was like there were just 3 of them ganging up on somebody, and I'm like, okay.
You had the Hello Kitty, the Battletoads. You had the Joust bird, like the ostrich was there.
You had the stupid Ninja Turtles.
The Ninja Turtles, and what irritated me is it was Michael Bay's Ninja Turtles. Yeah,
that's why it was the stupid Ninja Turtles. Like, God, it was just like. Why? Stop trying to make this happen, please.
Yeah. And I was so mad because I did appreciate what they did, not necessarily with having those, but having it where you see the people who are playing this running in the street.
Right.
And then the cut to immediately how those characters and their avatars were running toward the battle. That was cool.
Yeah, that was a neat way to do that. But yeah, I thought it would have been funnier had they somehow figured out a way to get like 4 different iterations of the Ninja Turtle.
That would have been cool.
That would have been hilarious to see like different versions all fighting together.
Then at that point I would have been okay with Michael Bay's characters.
Right, but unfortunately we just got Michael Bay.
And yeah, so we have those, and this is where you start to just see, the battles start to happen. IOI is sending out all these people, and at this point too, it's important to note that they have been trying to get the Crystal Key, and everybody's been failing. They're sitting at this Atari 2600, and there's literally, they say there's 2600 games that they can potentially play, and a minute into all of them, the ice breaks and the character zeroes out. And they finally get to Adventure, which is basically a cube maze, very, very primitive game, but Adventure... This character's playing, one of the IOI Sixers is playing this, and they're like, he's been playing for more than a minute. This is the game. So he's playing, and so he's playing this while this huge battle's going on.
Which is a very fun contrast that they go back to many times in the war room.
Yes.
They'll have, like, everybody else just fighting and wailing on, like, nothing. And then you just have that guy holding an Atari controller and just patiently looking at what he's doing.
Well, and you see, the Sixer in the War Center, and he's holding what is the joystick, but you don't see him holding the joystick. You see him with like his thumb up, and he's just it's got to be the stupidest acting technique. But you got this guy who's like, yeah, I'm playing a game.
Yeah, it was just object work to like the nth degree.
Oh yeah, so that was pretty funny. But he's doing this, and so you kind of have this pressure because you're like, they could win. This guy could be like the player who wins this, and. Eventually Artemis does get in, and it was funny because the setup was, Sorrento's like, so, how long does this orb last? And TJ Miller, you got IROC going, I'd say, about 10 million years, you're good. And then like 2 seconds later, Artemis finishes the chant, and it breaks.
Yeah.
At that point, then, you have We're Not Gonna Take It, so there's your Rock of Ages reference from me. Shameless plug. And that was really cool because then you see everybody like, all right, we got to get in. We can actually win this. And it just feels like there's just so much that happens. I don't even think we can talk about everything. You have a progression of events that happens in this battle that eventually leads to Artemis joining back up with Parzival in his car, Back to the Future car. You have...
It's called a DeLorean.
DeLorean. I knew it was. I couldn't think of it. You're like, it's called a DeLorean, you dumbass. Yes, in the DeLorean. Thank you. This is why I have guest hosts, guys. Because otherwise I would be doing the obscure references, and you're like, what the hell is he talking about? So, it is DeLorean. God damn it, I'll never live that one down. So she's joined him, and then you have Iron Giant, who, there's the irony there, the Iron Giant was a machine that was never supposed to be used for violence, and it is just kicking all the ass on the battlefield. And eventually we have Mechagodzilla come out with Sorrento. That one was true to the book.
Yes, that was correct.
And also Dido's character of using Gundam was true to the book. That made me happy, because I was like, Gundam? Fucking right. Yes, there we go.
Second movie in a row that you've reviewed that has Gundam show up. It is.
Yeah, there we go.
Pacific Rim also had Gundam.
Yep. And see, this is where I thought we were going to lose Dido. Because Dido does die in the book.
Yes.
And you have he goes. Remember the challenge from the beginning where we said like you get the gauntlet, which would give you 2 minutes of a giant robot, like
any giant
robot you needed. He goes and he does this, and he shows up in the Firefly ship.
Yes,
which I thought was pretty cool. And he very quickly starts eating up his 2 minutes.
Yeah, and
the beeping starts happening, and Sho is like, bail, you're out. I thought what was going to happen, it was going to explode or something, and we'd lose Dido. And I was like, all right, like, they're going to do some book stuff. Cool.
Yeah.
And they didn't. He just transformed back to himself.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. I guess happy, but disappointing that they didn't just... This is one... nothing bad happens to anybody in this movie.
Yeah, there were no consequences, like, really.
Poor Alice and Rick and the Stacks die. That was it.
But they were kind of rude, so...
They deserved it. They were bad. Yeah. They're kind of bad people.
In the book, they're much worse.
They are, yeah, they're assholes in the book. But we get Mechagodzilla, we get Gundam, we get this huge fight, and then ultimately, it is not Gundam that... Didn't seem like the Gundam did anything other than slow him down.
There were a couple of slashes in there, so, like, damage had been done enough to probably rattle it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a kill by any means.
And this is where I kind of got disappointed, because in the book, this last battle is epic. Like, it's not just a lot of people. There are multiple Gundams. Like, weren't there? Like,
yeah.
Like, everybody was using everything they had. Every upgrade and possible armor, weapon, anything. Everything was being used.
I feel like the reason they probably didn't do that was because that would be, like, a nightmare to deal with all of the references.
CGI alone for this
and
already
all
was
of
pretty rough.
Just, like, all of the rights to things.
Yeah.
Because, like, nothing from Disney showed up.
Nothing.
No Star Wars. They did reference Padawan.
They did, and they also at one point did reference... Or they had a Looney Tune, because he had Marvin the Martian at the beginning.
Yeah, Marvin the Martian shows up, I think, twice.
I saw him a couple times, yeah. And you had, a ton of Mortal Kombat references. Like, so you had a lot of references.
Yeah.
But you're right, Disney was not anywhere to be seen in any way, shape, or form, other than your Padawan. But that's a word that is not owned by Star Wars.
Right.
But it's a reference, yeah.
Yeah, so it was a little disappointing not to see that. I don't think we'll ever get any kind of great team up like that ever again. I think Roger Rabbit was the end of that, like, level of rival studios working together.
Yeah.
So, sad day.
Well, I think that's ultimately what happens. This fight continues to go on. You see the charges come into play. Iron Giant dies, which I thought was kind of interesting. We do technically. So here's the thing that works with this: Dido doesn't die, but I think that they give him they have him losing first as a kind of way to maybe reference the book of having him die.
But yeah, he zeroes out there.
He zeroes out by flipping off Sorrento in this Mechagodzilla. But actually, you've got Artemis who throws in, and I can't remember what it's called, but I remember having one. It was like a bouncy ball that looked like a...
Oh, Mad Ball.
Mad Ball, yes. I had one of those, or multiple ones of those.
Yeah, she shoots out an eye and throws in the Mad Ball.
And it explodes. And it kills him. It zeroes out Sorrento's character. And the Mechagodzilla goes down. So I thought it was kind of funny that Gundam did damage, but it was a little bouncy ball that eventually took him out. So yeah, we end up with basically finding that this guy who's been playing Adventure finally wins. And he's like, oh my god, I won. And the ice breaks. And you're like, what the hell? Like, what's going on? And then they realize it's not winning that matters. And you see... and I missed the holy hand grenade gets used, which is cool. And a very important part happens before that as well. Artemis is still in the war room.
Yes.
She's being hunted down by Sorrento, who knows that she's now in the war room. And this is where we had that callback to the line you said when she lets him go out and sacrifices herself to say, like, you'll forgive me one day. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, they're, like, worrying about how to get past all of these guards. They're pinned down. And, essentially, he notices that she's looking somewhere where nothing's happening in the game. Mm-hmm. And he goes, he's about to find you, isn't he? And she's like, don't worry about it. And he just finally goes, okay,
cheesy as hell line.
Yeah, it was literally the same line, which he didn't hear her say the line, which is the other thing, because it's like the door was shut when she said that he'll forgive her someday.
And she's like, I can live without you in the game. I can't live without you in real life.
And then he shoots her.
Yep. It's like it's almost as ironic as your Titanic scene. I'll never let go, Jack. And then she lets go. It's like, I get what you're saying here, but you could have gone a little bit less ironic as far as how abruptly this happens. I can't lose you, and then I shoot you. We get it. We know where they're going with it. But yeah, it made you laugh. And that was not the end of it, too. He had a couple more lines before the end of the movie where you literally groaned. You're like, ugh.
Yeah, the love story was a little laid on heavy for, it didn't get brought up a lot, but when it was brought up too much.
Well, essentially any scene where it's just those two, or even two or three of the five, and it's those two there, it was not as blunt as like, oh, they're in love, but it was not subtle.
Yeah.
You knew those things were going on.
They probably just lost the ability to communicate in the real world because of the technology. Let's use that logic.
Yeah, right?
It's like, I don't know how to deal with real people anymore.
Yeah, so I'm just going to shoot you in the face. And so then this ends up with, you've got Sho and, after the use of the holy hand grenade, Sho and Parsifal are
the only two
there. However, there's one portal, which I didn't notice it until the second time I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
There's one portal there, and I believe it's Irox.
Yeah.
Because then you see him show up right after that with Sorrento. Once you have Parsifal explain that it's not about winning, it's about the Easter egg, which within Adventure, it's one of the first games, or the first game that included an Easter egg put in there by the creator, where if you go into a dark room and you find the invisible dot, you take it back to the front, you'll see created by, and you see it's a little stupid Easter egg. It doesn't do anything, but it's there. So Sorrento's like, all right, thanks, I'll do it. And they're using Sho as this kind of like
hostage.
Yeah, a little hostage situation.
But then that gets immediately just taken down by the Cataclysm.
Yeah.
What was it? Yeah.
The Cataclysm. Yeah, you did not need to have Sho in a.
I did like that he had a tentacle arm.
Yeah,
now.
he had to buy an arm.
Because his arm gets cut off
by Sho,
and he runs away, and then he comes back and he has a tentacle arm that's not explained. It's just like, oh, this happens now.
Yeah, I didn't get that. I think it's this concept of he had to go and buy an arm
because he was losing credits because of it.
I thought it was weird. It was funny, but it was weird. And so then, he trumps everything with the Cataclysm. And Cataclysm is this weapon that is a level 99. It'll destroy every single life on a planet. Basically, it's a reset button
on a planet
of an entire planet within Oasis, including the user, the person who uses it. And he's like, I don't care. I'll do this because then I know you won't get it, and I know if I zero you out, you'll never get back to where you're supposed to be in time.
Right.
And at this point, though, it's funny because you see Iroc, who's like, dude, no,
I thought that we were just pretending that this was a thing.
This is just a bluff, right?
His loyalty immediately went away. At that point, it's like, hey, no.
He says, I got 10 years worth of shit in this body.
Yeah.
And it's funny because of all the people who actually, whenever you die in the game, you kind of just burst into the coinage that you've earned. When he dies after the Cataclysm is used, it's literally like a mountain of stuff.
It was basically a Smaug level pile of treasure.
Yes, exactly. Good reference there. And so he uses it, and everybody's gone. And he's kind of smug about this. He's like, all right, we can take our time.
The board gets cleared off.
Yep.
Everyone's missing.
And then all of a sudden, out of the smoke, Parsifal steps out, and he's in street clothes. He's in the generic starter clothes you'd get on an Avatar, which I thought was kind of a cool reference there. And he's like, all right, why am I still here? And he reaches into his pocket and he sees the quarter that he got from the curator for winning the little bet that he never even really made a bet. He just kind of offhandedly said it. But this quarter, he flips over and it says extra life. I'm like, all right. And so then he gets to continue playing. It's at this point that the movie kind of is in a very quick downhill slope to the end. He knows that he needs to get the Easter egg within Adventure. He gets it. He gets the key, and then you see the impact of the outside world on the Oasis, because they're in this moving van still trying to get away from everybody. And I thought this was kind of funny because you've got him, he does the first 2 keys very quickly.
Yeah.
The third key, well, first off, even before getting the key, he goes to grab it and he falls over.
Twice. And do you even want it?
Yeah. Yeah. You got Anorak, he's like, do you even want this key? He's like, well, are you going to take it or not? And so then, he finally gets the key, but then you have everybody watching who's like, they don't even care that it's not IOI.
They're like the OOLogists had the most pure reaction to this, because they're just into the culture. And you can tell that as soon as, it switches to this live feed, they are now on his side completely, because they just want to see the history happen.
They know that it's like one of those things where, I don't know how much of it you were involved with recently, but with the March Madness, where the 16th seed beat the 1.
Yeah.
Everybody had Virginia going a lot further along, but you're like, screw it, we're watching history, let's go. Let's see something cool.
All right.
And so that's the same vibe. You felt like they were just happy to see something that had been so many years in the making take place. And they got to watch it, the live feed. They didn't get to just hear about it, they got to watch it. So he goes and he does this, and he finally opens it up, and he goes into this huge throne room, and Halliday's there saying hey, sign the contract and it's yours. And it felt kind of cheesy to me of this, oh no, this is a final test. I felt we were past that. I didn't know if we needed that scene.
Yeah, I liked it, but at the same time, it's what did you cut out of the movie to make this point?
Yes. You could have given me something else, but you gave me this.
One more giant robot.
Yeah, come on. Give me one more Gundam or something.
Ultraman was supposed to show up.
Ultraman! I was expecting that to be who it was, but yeah, it wasn't. Because that's who he chose, isn't it? Is Ultraman. Yeah, it was Gundams that were flying all over the place.
Right, but Ultraman was the one that Wade had.
Yeah, and it was Wade, it wasn't Dido. Because
Dido was dead.
So yeah, he gets into this and he says, no, I'm not gonna make the same mistake you did. This is too much like when you made Ogden Morrow give away his shares. And then you see this smirk, and it was a final test. But they end up in everything kind of melts into the real Halliday, and not the Avatar anymore, and his childhood home, which I thought this was kind of cool. It was a little creepy.
Yeah,
but it made sense to me.
In the book, his childhood home plays a part.
Yes.
That's a big chunk of it. So seeing that come into play I enjoyed that. That was a good piece to have back in there.
And I really enjoyed this final message from Halliday. It wrapped things up in a way that this movie needed, where he's kind of saying, I created the Oasis because I didn't fit in reality, but I realized that reality is real. It's also the only place you could get a decent meal. And that's true. It's and so they talk about it earlier, in the Oasis, you were able to do everything except for eat, sleep, and use the restroom.
Yep.
And so it's kind of one of those things where it's we all like our phones, but at some point we have to put them down and realize that we're in a room where, hey, we got to go sleep, or we have to go get some food. We can't do that through our phones. And that was kind of what this final little monologue with Halliday really got for me, at least. But I don't know. I liked it. He gets the egg, which is funny because Halliday can't find it.
Right.
Can't find his own Easter egg. But he gets it. And then this is where I didn't buy this. This is probably my biggest issue as far as logistics of all the ones I found. You've got Sorrento who goes and chases them down and literally can just shoot them and take everything.
Yep.
And he doesn't. He just watches this glowing light come from the hands.
I'll rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
The most upsetting part of that scene is the fact that the mob of people just were like, yeah, whatever, he's got a gun.
Probably 80 to 100 people minimum.
Yeah, it's they could have just ganged up on him immediately and disarmed him. But instead, he just parts the crowd with a pistol.
A gun. And all the people that are behind him didn't decide oh, we could tackle him. Or, hey, one person,
see us.
He's aiming the gun up.
Yeah.
He's not even aiming it at anybody.
It would have been very easy to just take him down, but no.
Yeah, you're right.
So that was the more upsetting part.
You're absolutely right.
And then he has like this moral epiphany of just like, oh my god, it's so beautiful or whatever. Like, I don't know what happens. And then the cops are like, throw down the gun. And he's like, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Like, why not?
So, yeah, and this is, everything happens so quickly. Like, basically we see that now he does, he has won. He's gotten the Easter egg, Wade has. Sorrento is arrested. Ogden Morrow shows up and he's like, you know, I'm here. And then this is where we get the cheesy line where he's like, can you give me a second? I'm not going to make the same mistake Halliday did. And he kisses her. And then they like, all of a sudden they're like, we're going to kiss, but we're going to kiss horizontally.
Yeah, it was like this was the new Spider-Man kiss, I think.
Was.
Like, just like, I'm going to suspend myself and you're going to fall backwards.
Yep.
And everybody but the 11-year-old's going to turn around and not watch.
The 11-year-old's like, ooh, what's this? And Dido's like, dude, turn around.
Dude, read the room.
Yeah, know your audience, man. And then you have Ogden Morrow who shows up, or the police show up, and then that's where H steps out and is like, hey, yeah, I record everything. Which I don't remember any confession. He was talking about stuff, but he didn't confess to anything, did he?
He might have. Like, I didn't, it didn't seem out of question that he said something stupid.
It just wasn't completely obvious that he did.
Yeah.
But anyways, he said something in this hijacking of his feed where that was enough to then put him away. And then Morrow shows back up with lawyers, and they're like, "Hey, these are the people you need right now, lawyers." And he then decides to share it with the rest, which is how it happens in the book. However, it's a 4-way split, not a 5-way, because Dido's gone. So then very quickly, it's like it wraps up. We find out one important little element that the curator was Ogden Morrow, which, again, a voice thing like H, I should have caught that.
Yeah, that was the most upsetting one. They give Simon Pegg an American accent in this film.
Yeah.
And so I just immediately accept that anytime I hear Simon Pegg, he's going to have an American accent.
Yep.
And so you have this British curator, and it's like, oh, look, a funny British robot. And then it's like, damn it, that was him the whole time.
Yeah, and it's not even hard to hear.
It's not even disguised.
No.
Like, that's why that's the more upsetting voice cue that I missed.
Oh yeah, that one should have been so obvious. We find out Morrow's the curator, and he comes on as a guest. What is it? What do they call him in it?
Like a non-exclusive partner.
Yeah.
Like consultant.
A consultant, yeah. And he only wants to be paid a quarter because the guy's got plenty of money. He doesn't care. And he's doing it because he enjoys the Oasis.
And he just wants to make sure that the kids don't screw stuff up.
Yeah. And he's there because he's got the experience and they don't. And so they do a few things. They take IOI out of the Oasis. They don't give them the opportunity to use it. Because essentially IOI is not a company that is the Oasis. They just use it.
Right. They were the number 2 tech company.
They were. So they are no longer able to use it. So then that gets rid of the loyalty, prisons, camps, and they say like they kind of prevent all this. And then the big thing is that on Tuesdays and Thursdays they shut it down, which is kind of reflecting back to the like you have to live in reality every now and then.
Yeah.
And then it ends very quickly, and it was like I didn't like the ending.
Yeah,
because it's like you gotta remember the important things of like love and reality, black. And I was like, what the hell? That's the ending? Like I would have expected something else.
Yeah, a little bit more expositional.
And it was almost like awkward. Like she was looking at him in an awkward way. They kissed, and then it was like, are we done? Is that the end of the movie? All right, roll the credits.
Yeah,
I don't know. I got a weird vibe. And then for me the weirdest part is a movie based on Easter eggs did not have an Easter egg at the end of the credits.
So yeah, that was a little weird. I did like that the place that he was living in was full of references itself. I didn't catch all of them.
He had like a centipede and a joust, I think, arcade box. There were some, your Rush posters on the wall and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a kind of a weird ending, but that's it. That's the end of the movie. So, a few things. I'm going to get a couple wrapping up things out of you. First off, what was your favorite Easter egg or reference in the entire movie? The one that when you saw, you're like, oh, that's cool.
I have to go with the Zemeckis cube because I didn't catch it the first time. And I had to realize it through being explained it. And it's almost that upsetting level of, I should have caught that. And I'm sure there's going to be so many more of those upon, like, rewatching.
Yeah, I think mine was probably, well, I like I said earlier, I really enjoyed seeing the Battletoads. I thought that was cool. But I think my favorite was, now that I know the name, the Madball. Because I remember having those, and when I saw that, like, at his feet, I was like, holy crap, I actually think I had that one, and it was like, oh my god. It was just a cool reference there. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. Either that, or the use of Mechagodzilla, just because that was there, but that was in the book, but it was just cool to see how they created that. In your opinion, how does this stack up against the book? So those of us that are listening, who have read the book and have seen the movie now, what's your opinion on how they stack up?
I feel like they are similar but different. They have the same arc. Mm-hmm. Like, you go through the same progression to get to the end goal, but the path is different enough to where they both kind of stand on their own to a degree. I think it's because, again, you couldn't shove all the references that you could in written word into a 2-hour movie. Yeah. So I think that for lovers of pop culture, definitely, if you haven't read the book, go ahead and take a look at it. Read through it. It explains references that, like, there are things where it'll be like, it looked like this, and then it's like, upon further review, it was this. Like, because people pay attention to this stuff in this world. Yes. So there's a lot of detail that gets left out in the movie, and just changed to make it a better movie plot line rather than a book plot line.
Yeah, and I can see that. For me, I think I like the book so much more, but I think that in comparison, if you didn't read the book, you would probably love the movie. Mm-hmm. If you like this concept, you would probably love the movie. Furthermore, I think that it's one of those things that, like you said, they do have very similar elements. They get to the same end, but they take very different paths. And I completely agree to that. Kind of felt like a final thoughts, but what's your final thoughts on it? And then let's give a ranking of, we've got our high five. So let's say our ranking of 1 to 5 members of the high five.
So final thoughts, I agree that the movie was good. If you read the book, again, like we had said, the first time through was a little disappointing because you're expecting moments that you want to see from the book, and maybe it doesn't come out quite that way. And so that was a little disappointing. But then the second time, when you're able to just kind of enjoy the plot, the story, the Easter eggs, it was a lot better. So I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5, honestly, of the high five. We might leave Dido out of there because he should have died. So... Yeah, I'm with you. I watched this twice as well. The first time I was not too thrilled with it. I thought there were elements that I thought were fun and I liked things, but I didn't appreciate it. I thought it just was not very well done. I was expecting more, and I was missing 2 of the parts that I love the most from the book, the film sinks, and the challenges themselves were missing. I thought the first challenge with the race was awesome, and then I felt it was all downhill from there. Like you had mentioned, it became more about less about the pop culture and more about Halliday, which Halliday is important, but Halliday's love of pop culture is what the entire quest and the Easter egg was revolving around. Right. I missed that. But when it comes down to the movie itself, I liked it. I thought it was well done. Visually, it was great. There was nothing visual about the movie that I looked at and I was like, that was kind of tacky, or that wasn't done very well. Yeah. I liked it. I thought it was good. I'm right with you. I was going to give it a 4 out of 5, and I was going to say the Dido line, but you stole it from me. So let's say that's why you let me go first.
That's why I'm a gracious host, but sometimes that bites me in the ass. So I'll give it a 4 out of 5. And for me, I'm going to leave out Parzival because why not? I don't know.
I took yours.
You took mine. That's why. Yeah. Now this whole episode's ruined now, Jeff.
It's because you couldn't remember what a DeLorean was. That's why you took out Parcel.
That's karma coming to bite me in the ass. So that's why. But yeah, 4 out of 5 for me as well. It was good. It was a good movie. Go check it out. I'll definitely probably watch it a few more times to try to catch more of the references, at very least just for that. But it was fun. I had a good time watching it. And I think, again, second time around, I really appreciated it more. So if you go and see it and you're kind of not too pleased with it, for whatever reason, give it another shot. And if you still hate it, well, then I'm sorry that you watched it twice. But I think that you'll probably enjoy it a little bit more. Anything else?
I think that's pretty much it. I'm excited for Ready Player 2.
Yeah. The sequel. Doesn't everybody die in the end of the first one? No. I don't know. Maybe Armada is another Ernest Cline movie, and I think that one actually probably fits more into a movie format. If you haven't checked it out.
Because it's The Last Starfighter.
Yeah. It essentially is. It's that and Ender's Game. Like he just rewrote Ender's Game and gave it new names. But yeah, it's a good movie. Go check it out. Jack, thanks again you are the first 3-timer. We'll probably have you on for a 4th. You've
I'm
done
just
enough.
Racking it up now.
You've done enough at this point that I think we expect you to keep coming back. So next week we are checking out A Quiet Place. I am pumped for this one. I've been waiting for this movie for about a month and a half. That's all the first day. And we have a new guest host, Kara. She is also in Rock of Ages, so you'll probably get a few Rock of Ages. And she's also the friend who doesn't like Spider-Man, so we're probably going to get into a fight next week. But yeah, she'll be on next week to review A Quiet Place. And until then, you guys can always reach us, as always, through Twitter or through Gmail. Both of them, either at Drive-In Eventide, or our Gmail is driveineventide@gmail.com. Until then, though, enjoy your next week. And I think it's important that we didn't even reference this once, but we are recording this on Easter Sunday, and this is a movie
about Easter eggs.
So yeah. It all comes full circle here on the Drive-In. Until then, though, Jack, thanks again for coming.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll see you guys again shortly. Drive home safe.